Okay, we are live. Coming down in 3, 2, and 1. Hi, everybody. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah for those of you who celebrated a few weeks ago. Do you say good Kwanzaa, happy Kwanzaa? I'm not even sure. We want to cover it all, though, guys. So happy holidays to everybody. Unfortunately, the holidays not all that happy for some of the folks around the NFL, including our local team, the Chicago Bears. This, of course, is the ShawLocal.com Bears Insider Podcast. I am Hub Arkush, along with my co-hosts each week. Our Shaw Media Group sports editor, Kyle Nabors, is alongside our Chicago Bears beat reporter, Sean Hammond, here as well. And guys, another week, another mess. I don't know if anybody really wants to go backwards too much, but I don't know how we could not talk for at least a couple minutes about last Monday night with the Vikings, because kind of as I led my column, my game column, I've never seen anything quite like it. It was a stunning performance by the Chicago Bears for how well they played in so many ways. I mean, you line up with 14 players on the COVID list, your entire starting secondary out. Not only guys flexed up from the practice squad, but guys signed to the practice squad to have enough to practice with and then flexed up and playing in the game. You had Robert Quinn, brilliant again, the return of Akeem Hicks, who played one of his best games as a Bear. And you hold the Minnesota Vikings to under 90 yards in the first half, under 200 yards on the game, and still find a way to lose 17-9. It was one of the worst officiated games I've ever seen. And while that goes both ways, certainly the Bears bore the brunt of that. And part of the problem was that they'd made so many stupid penalties on their own. They probably helped the officials look for issues. So, Sean, we were sitting next to each other up there in the press box, and it was just an incredibly strange football game to watch and explain and understand.
Yeah, strange is a good word for it. It was a weird evening, and the red zone struggles are what really stand out when you're looking at that Bears offense. I mean, they moved the ball fairly well at other parts of the field, and they were able to get to the red zone, and they went 0 for their first 4, not until that last touchdown in the final seconds, which I don't even know what you think about that, but really they were 0 for in the red zone up until that point.
Kyle, it's kind of wild. Part of the problem, obviously, is you've got guys who've never played in an NFL game, and you would expect that that's where the dumb penalties are coming from, but that's not who they were called on. There was a game-changing call on Deion Bush for one of the better plays of the season that, no matter how you spin it and how many ways you look at it, could not be penalized in any way. And yet the officials did try and justify it afterwards. They said an illegal hit to a defenseless receiver. It didn't happen, but that's what they called. And then several plays later, Tease Tabor, a young veteran, but a veteran, again, makes one of the best plays of his career. And they called the new rule, the low block on the defense. Weren't bothered by the fact that he actually didn't make contact with the guy that they said he was throwing a low block at, and that he wasn't throwing a low block. He went through him to make a tackle, and there were other penalties that were iffy. There were some that weren't called. There were some really dumb penalties by the Bears, but it's kind of become endemic this year around the NFL. Officials deciding the outcome of football games, and it made it that much harder to really evaluate where the Bears were at.
I mean, the officiating was bad again on Monday night. That's the second time, at least the second time this year, we've seen that really weigh heavily on an outcome in a Bears game. We saw that in the Steelers game as well. We talked about it a little bit last week, that I talked about how poorly the NFL has the product has been this year. I know you guys disagreed with me last week. I texted you guys on Sunday as I was watching game that it was another miserable day of football, and I really thought it was. But part of the reason has been the officiating. It's been really inconsistent, and whether it's a new rule or an existing rule, things have not been applied consistently across the board, and it makes for a really bad product at times.
Yeah, Sean, I don't think I disagreed with Kyle. Just at that particular moment, I wasn't really watching, to be honest with you. And I think there has been some very bad football. I guess maybe I disagreed in the sense that I don't think it's all been bad. I think there's been some great games as well. But I think we all agree that the officiating, and this has been going on for years, and usually you hear most of the complaining coming from cities where they have 4 and 10 football teams. There is a connection there. There's no question about that. But the problem I think we're seeing this year is these new rules that they keep creating, a lot of them intended to protect players, which you can't argue against, but they all cause the officials to make judgment calls. They're not cut and dried rules. I mean, those are easy to make, and when you miss one, everybody knows it. But in this case, most of these rules, the officials are interpreting them differently depending on who the crew is and what the game is. And that makes it really hard for the players and for fans to be able to count on anything. And guys, I'm going to make a real leap here, but when you add the element of legalized gambling, and let's be honest, it's out there, and you now have so many people with more than just fandom riding on these games, I think that's why you're hearing this hue and cry around the league. I
mean, we all used to bitch consistently about how they couldn't figure out what was a catch and what wasn't a catch, and they found a way essentially to make that judgment call. That aspect of it seems to be in a half dozen different penalty calls at this point, and that's just not what you want to see from your football game. You don't want officials having to make those judgments on a consistent basis. It slows the game down, which is never fun. Football games are long enough with all the commercial breaks if you're watching at home, and then you add in that type of inconsistency, and it just makes it a lot more difficult to watch.
Sean, I'm curious for your opinion, because I think that there is a really simple answer to a lot of this, not to all of it, to a lot of it. And it should surprise no one that it comes from Bill Belichick, because he is far and away the smartest football guy maybe in the history of the game, or at least the best coach. But his argument for years has been instant replay is a good thing. But why do you only use it for a few things when you can, in fact, fix mistakes that are made in games? And he has a very simple suggestion. He brings it up every year. Leave the challenge system the way it is. Give each team 2 challenges per half and let them use or lose their timeouts or whatever it may be. But let them challenge any play they want. Don't restrict it to matters of possession or whatever it's restricted to. And the reason I bring that up is because you had a situation on those 2 calls I just mentioned in the Bears game. Of course, the officials had to try and defend them afterwards. What else are they going to do? They can't say, nope, you're right, we ruined the game. If Matt Nagy had been allowed to throw a flag at that point on the call on Deion Bush, the officials would have looked at it and seen, I should say, that he did it exactly the way they're being taught to do it to try and protect players now. He did not hit him in the head. He did not lead with his head or his shoulder. He crossed his arms and went at the football and never did make contact with his head. You had a back judge who was in the position he was supposed to be, but because of that could not actually see the hit. He instinctively saw the timing of it. The flag came out, and now they're left defending it. I think that's a perfect example of something that could have easily been fixed if they would have just used the technology that they have at their disposal anyway.
Yeah, I agree. That would be an easy fix. I guess the NFL just doesn't want to open up that box and go there, because there's so many plays when you could do that. And I think that's why, just leaving 2 challenges for the team would do that effectively without prolonging the game. At least not too much more than it already is. It's already a long game. But yeah, I mean, the officiating did affect that game, and this isn't the first time we've seen that with the Bears, and that's unfortunate. And yeah, that's going to happen across the league, but you don't want those big swings. I mean, that was a huge play in that game, the one we're talking about with Deion Bush, and really affected the field position and the way that the flow of that game and where things were going. And at the same time, you don't want to put it all on the officials. You still had your struggles on offense. You still had, even with all the guys out, it was Justin Fields and David Montgomery, 2 starters, who fumbled 2 of the first 3 possessions away. So certainly the Bears have other issues to worry about, but yeah, I mean, you don't want that to play such a big role in the game.
Well, I mean, we bring up technology too, and the refs are, at least the head official is plugged into the league office. Like, there's a really simple solution to this, right? I mean, the Sky Judge, which we've heard mentioned, right? I mean, if you want to use the technology, the league has all those camera angles. You can speed up the game. They can have someone, that is able to quickly say, yeah, that's not a penalty, pick that up. That should not be a really difficult thing to do in 2021.
Well, you're absolutely right. You guys are both right. I think Sean nailed it. They're worried about the length of the game. Kyle, you're right. I mean, but the problem now is you're now adding 16 more officials overruling the official on the game. And the other thing relative to Sean's point is that while both teams have 2 challenges per half, they rarely all get used. Now with Belichick,
it's not per half, is it?
Per game.
Per game, 2 challenges per
I'm
game.
sorry,
And then if you win both, you get a third, right?
Yeah, right. I'm sorry, 2 challenges per game, but they rarely all get used. And I think to Sean's point, they would if you could challenge anything you want. Yeah, there's no question about that. But what would it add to the game? 4, 5, 6 minutes that I think everybody would gladly accept if it was to get the game right, So anyway, we're kind of off where we were, and I guess that's what makes podcasts fun, and it's interesting. And I'm curious what other people think. We're going to get to a lot of your questions in a few minutes, but I do want to get back to the Bears and that performance Monday night for just a few minutes because there's a couple more things I think we do have to talk about. There was also the emergence of a new player in Thomas Graham, which has been a story this week. And he may have been the best player on the field. And it's interesting because he was drafted by the Bears in the 6th round last spring, but then initially ended up waived and on the practice squad. Had not played in an NFL game, or at least not played cornerback. I think he on special teams one week. I can't even remember. I think this may have been his first game. Actually,
I don't believe so.
No, I think this was his first NFL game, and he had 7 tackles, 3 passes defense. Just to get a little perspective for everybody, and this is in my column, which I somehow screwed up and got too late last night. So it's tomorrow's papers, I guess, but hopefully online today.
It's online already.
Yeah. Those 3 pass breakups that he had tie him for 3rd most on the team for the season in one game. That's how well he played. And that's not a negative comment about the Bears secondary. Jalen Johnson has 9, DeAndre Houston Carson and Kindle Vildor each have 4, a bunch of other guys with 3. But the point is he got that much done in one game and looked really good doing it. And kind of opened the door to some questions about, as you look at these last 3 games, is there anybody else they need to look at? But in the case of Thomas Graham, Sean, it was just a really fun story. And visiting with him yesterday, and we had forgotten because last time we visited with him was after the draft. But he's a really kind of energetic, outgoing, very well-spoken young man. And I think a lot of people felt that one of the Bears' biggest problems as we look to next season may be at cornerback, and they may have found that they have a little more, or at least a few more options or answers than we realized.
Yeah, I remember talking to him just hour or two after he was drafted, and I think he ended his press conference or whatever by saying, I love talking to the media. Like, oh yeah, I like that. That's a good start. You're off to a good start, Thomas Graham. And obviously he's off to a good start on the field. That was a really impressive performance. And, it's telling that the Bears already signed him to the active roster on Wednesday. They brought him up permanently from the practice squad. He's going to be, in the mix in the secondary these last 3 games. And he deserves it. I mean, that was a really, really impressive performance. And he was one of those guys who we wanted, we didn't really know what we were going to get because we hadn't seen him this year. And Daz Newsome was another guy in that same boat. And while we didn't see, I think Daz was targeted once, didn't make a catch, but he was out there a lot. He played a lot of snaps, probably about half the game, maybe a little bit less. I don't remember.
He played more.
I think he played more. Yeah. Maybe it was like 60%.
Yeah, he got on the field more once.
Once Jakeem Grant suffered that concussion, he was out there a lot more. But yeah, I mean, really impressive debut from Graham, and I think we're all excited to see sort of what he does next these last couple of games,
guys.
Also too, sorry, one more thing. It'll be interesting to see, if he's out there with Jalen Johnson, how if teams are going to keep coming after him as opposed to Johnson.
I'm going to throw a question up from Gary Ross since it ties into what we're talking to. But first, I'm going to throw this up for Alan just because probably a feeling from a lot of fans. I'd rather talk about state of officiating than the state of the Bears right now. Happy holidays. Yeah, I think we all agree with you at this point, buddy. But so going over to Gary's question, why doesn't Daz Newsome and Charles Snowden get more playing time to see if they have any diamonds in the rough? And Hub, that was the point of your column yesterday, but it was, when you told me I was texting back and forth with you. The Bears seem to have a knack of finding these guys in late rounds and even undrafted guys. Unfortunately, they also seem to have a knack that it takes them a little longer than probably what is required to get these guys on the field. We saw that last year with some injuries on the offensive line where Alex Bars and Sam Mustipher stepped in, and a couple weeks in, we went, hey, these guys can play. Why haven't they been out there? after the offensive line had been struggling. You kind of saw that with Thomas Graham. They've been searching for a second cornerback behind Jalen Johnson for much of the season after Kendall Vildor struggled. And, do you sense that trend, I guess, Hub, or am I extrapolating something that isn't there?
Well, I don't dispute it. I don't know that I sense it, but I don't dispute it. And I'm about to sneeze, so forgive me, guys. I'll try and avoid that as best I can. You know how that goes when you feel one coming. I had some outreach on Twitter and email. People, of course, immediately wanted to attack, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace for why Graham didn't get on the field. And I think you have to realize, guys, when these players are on the practice squad, they're available to all 32 teams. Any one of the 31 NFL teams, all of whom scouted Thomas Graham the same way the Bears did before they drafted him in the 6th round, could have come and signed him off the Bears practice squad at any point. Nobody did. So it's not like just the Bears best. That's number one. Number two, Thomas Graham himself, when I asked him about it on Wednesday, said, it really wasn't until after the bye that I started to feel like I was playing the way I can. And I think a lot of people forgot, in his case in particular, after starting as a true freshman at Oregon and starting every game his first 3 years, he opted out in 2020. He had not played any football at all in 2 years, basically 2 years by the time he got to training camp with the Bears. And so none of that fully explains it. The Bears obviously liked him. They drafted him. But both the team and he felt that he just wasn't ready. What's the common thread in a lot of the guys you just mentioned, Kyle? You've got Sam Mustipher, Alex Bars, Charles Snowden, all undrafted rookie free agents. And so what do you really get to see from them that you hadn't seen in college when they went undrafted? I mean, practices in the NFL ever since the new CBA were signed are kind of a joke. There's almost no live contact. And now with the COVID precautions in particular the last couple of years. So all of that said, it is still a valid question and concern, and it may be another negative with this. This is more the coaching staff really than the personnel department. Once we know what the rules have been here, Ryan Pace has control of the 53. Once he gives Matt Nagy the 53, Matt Nagy decides who plays. That's the way they've tried to do it together for 4 years. So you can look at both of them in that regard. But then also, guys, Charles Snowden actually has been active and has played over the last 4. And he's a guy, I loved him when they signed him. I think he could be the next Roy Robertson Harris. Still think I do. But every scouting report I saw said needs a year or two of seasoning. To me, Daz Newsome, we'll see. But unlike Graham, he did get out there for the whole game and did nothing. Now, that leads me to one other thing I want to get to before we go all questions about that game, because while there was some guys, Quinn, Hicks, Roquan Smith, David Montgomery, Thomas Graham, who played very, very well. This column was for earlier in the week. And again, guys, we hope that you're with us regularly at shawlocal.com. We know it costs a few pennies a day, but there is a holiday special. Make sure you get to the website. And we really would love to have you get all of our outstanding Bears coverage or just buy our newspapers, all our Shaw newspapers and the Daily Herald. The point that I made I forget, I guess it was the Tuesday column, Kyle, as well as some guys played, people are going to look at the stat sheet and see, Justin Fields' numbers and say, oh, had one of his better games, threw for 285 yards. I thought Justin Fields may have played his worst game since Cleveland. You go back and study the tape and you look at what went on out there and all the times that he just appeared completely lost and all the throws that he missed and all the reads he didn't make. And he took a huge step forward at Lambeau on Sunday night where it looked like, hey, he's finally figured out when to pull the ball down, how to come out of the pocket, how to run successfully, how to protect himself. And then after I thought he had taken a big step forward against the Packers, he appeared to go, 180 degrees backwards. Those two of those 3 sacks were just him completely lost in the pocket, turning around, running the wrong way, and possibly turning what could have been coming out of the pocket and positive runs into 10, 11-yard losses. So, Sean, we didn't really get to talk about that after the game. I don't know what you thought, but that was disturbing to me at this point in the season.
Yeah, I mean, there's reason to be concerned. I wouldn't necessarily agree that it was his worst game since Cleveland. I guess I'd have to think about that, but certainly there was, mistakes were made, and my feeling coming out of this game too was that there was a little bit of discombobulation from this team as a whole. I mean, how many times did we see them looking a little bit confused out there? Whether it was Darnell Mooney on that 4th down play, or a couple of times Tevin Jenkins, that one penalty he got, he jumped out of the huddle and ran to the wrong side, and his teammates had to point him over the other direction. I thought there was a lot of sloppiness going on in that game. And, I don't know if that has to do with just having so many new guys, but at the same time, Darnell Mooney is a guy who's been out there all season. So that shouldn't necessarily be happening for a guy like him. But looking at Fields' game, I'm okay with it. I mean, sure, he made some mistakes, and yes, you don't want to see those sacks. He's taken, way too many sacks this season as a whole. But that's part of the learning curve.
I agree with Hub. I thought it was his worst game since Cleveland, but it's interesting because there were some really encouraging signs. You looked at Sean, your Bear Down Nerd Up, which again, go to shawlocal.com. Sean writes that column every week. It's a really good statistical breakdown. You look at Justin Fields' deep passing was really good in that game. His accuracy downfield continues to improve. We've seen each month his I believe it's his average depth of target has increased. Those are good signs. But he did really regress on Monday in terms of short passing situation, in terms of just overall effectiveness. He had become a lot more over the last 3 weeks decisive near the line of scrimmage, whether it was keeping his eyes downfield while running or just tucking and running. All that kind of went away on Monday night, which was, I expect some up and down from a rookie quarterback. But it did seem a little odd coming against Minnesota, a defense that has just been bad. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. It's been a bad defense.
Well, and I think the problem, guys, and we're going to get to the questions now, or at least a lot of your questions that we can, is that we're at the point where there is so much negativity around this team that you can't have objective analysis and conversation without people going to one extreme or the other. And I don't know, maybe that's just symptomatic of the world we live in right now with our politics and everything else. But in this particular case, I don't know if I could be any more clear. I think Justin Fields is an outstanding prospect. I think he's a rare prospect, and I think he has a chance to be a great quarterback. And nothing's changed my mind about that. I think what is often misunderstood about this is the time and preparation it takes to get these kids there. And I think it's a fair question as to whether they've helped him or harmed him by throwing him out there when he's not ready. But please don't misunderstand. This is not an attack on Justin Fields. This is not suggesting the Bears blew another pick. It's none of those things. It's analyzing his development and how far he's come. And so now we're at the stage to, maybe to your point a little bit, Sean, let's not forget, you've got the COVID outbreak. They did not practice all week. They're coming off a Sunday night game. They literally had a couple walkthroughs. They've got 14 guys out there, some of whom have never been on an NFL field. And so, yeah, it's going to be a little bit sloppy. Now, the Darnell Mooney thing, you wonder about that because that shouldn't happen with him. And he acknowledged it. And so you look at his coaches too. And the coaches do get some, I don't want to say blame, but responsibility for all of this. Then you look at the Tevin Jenkins example. That's on Tevin Jenkins. I mean, and that's just a young kid who's too excited and hasn't settled down enough that he actually runs to the wrong side of the line of scrimmage. You can't blame the coaches for that one. But then you try and analyze Justin Fields. And immediately afterwards on radio, I got to deal with people. Oh, well, Jimmy Graham dropped a touchdown pass and Darnell Mooney, didn't get his feet down. Well, those were back-to-back plays where Jimmy Graham did not drop that ball. Patrick Peterson knocked it out of his hands because the ball was thrown too late. And on the next play, Darnell Mooney made a near miraculous catch just to bring the ball down at all, and there was no chance for him to get a second foot down. If you go back and look at the tape of this game, or any game for that matter, how many times do you see Justin Fields hit a receiver in stride? How many times do you see him lead a receiver and put the ball right where it needs to be? Even on the nice plays he's making at medium depth and down the field, you've got guys turning 180 degrees to catch the ball and look for it and reach up, reach over, reach up. I mean, he's not in rhythm right now. And that is something that, comes with experience. The great ones have it all the time. But when you really, study this tape and look at the plays, He's got a long way to go, and I think the whole idea of letting him take this beating his rookie year, and he has taken a beating over the last 11 weeks, was that this kind of thing would improve and get better. And I don't know that he's improving at the rate that you would like him to.
I don't have much to add to that, Kyle.
I think that's a fair assessment. People, the thing that becomes really difficult, and you get, there's a certain segment that's all just going to take everything Hub just said and throw it away and put it on the coaching staff. And sure, some of that probably does have to do with the coaching
Kyle,
staff.
I don't mean to interrupt, but a lot of it's on the coaching staff.
A lot of it.
This is not a defensive man. This is analysis of the football team. Yeah,
but I mean, that there is a lot on the coaching staff, but at the same time, like Justin Fields needs to be able to unload the ball on time on a 7-yard curl route and not hesitate that extra split second and allow the defender to recover and knock the ball away. He's not reading quickly enough yet. That's still going to come. I'm very confident it's going to come. It's taking a bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Sean, it's pretty simple. I mean, this thing is broken. The team needs a coaching change, and I hate that because I like Matt Nagy. I think the guy has been nothing but class, and he is nowhere near the incompetent boob that he gets painted as by a lot of the haters. But Monday night was his 63rd game as head coach of the Bears. We saw the product. That's not good enough. That's how you get judged in the NFL, and that's why he needs to be replaced. Now, I don't know what the answer is on Ryan Pace in the front office. I have my thoughts. We've all written about it extensively. So, people immediately want to make this an either or who are we going to blame? No, you have the future of the franchise, you hope, in Justin Fields. I have seen nothing to suggest to me that he doesn't have the rare arm talent and the outstanding athleticism that we knew he did when he was drafted out of Ohio State. That's what you want to mold that guy. And you now need to get the right new coaches to do it. But you also can't say that, it's completely up to the coaches. It's up to the young man too, because let's get down to it, to the nub of it. And I promise we'll get to the questions. The reason that 90% of these first round quarterbacks fail is mental, and it's not smart or dumb or any of that. I've had this conversation a few times with Kurt Warner. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's a friend because we do broadcasts together for Westwood One, and he explains it better than anybody. At that position, the key to a great quarterback, what separates the Hall of Fame guys from everybody else, is the ability to process information on a split second. It's to know what you're seeing and to be able to physically react to it, literally with a hair trigger. And there are very few guys some are born with it, and there are some who develop it, but there's very few who develop it if they're not born with it. Now, Fields strikes me as really bright and thoughtful, and I think he's certainly capable of developing it, but that's what's missing so far. And the great unknown with these rookie quarterbacks is how long it takes to teach it to them.
Yeah, and I think that's part of I think this offseason is so important for Justin Fields. No matter who's the coach, you want to see him improve in that area. And a lot of that is just studying and getting to know the game. And sure, you can't get a feel for it when you're not playing per se, but, you can still do some of that legwork that goes into making sure that you're reading these things correctly throughout the 6-month offseason.
We talked a lot early in the year about Justin dropping back and not stepping up into the pocket when avoiding pressure. That seemed to kind of correct itself for the most part over the last month, but it really came back on Monday. And that to me is a pretty solid sign that he is still not reading defenses correctly and that he doesn't have confidence, which is why he's taking the sacks that he did on Monday night.
All right, Kyle, why don't you go ahead and pick our first question for us while I kind of put a wrap on this. In the post-game press conference, Justin was asked about a specific play and whether it was his primary read. And he gave a very detailed coach speak type answer about, this was my read, this is what I saw, this is what I was supposed to do, this is what I did. That's all great. That's all stuff that he's being taught in the film room, and it's good that he knows that. But being able to recite it after the game is not the same as being able to see it and react to it at game speed. And that's what we talk about all the time, the difference in game speed from college football to the NFL. And then the final piece of it is, why was Justin Fields the 4th quarterback drafted as opposed to the 1st or the 2nd? It's because some of the scouting reports were a little concerned about him reacting with game speed at Ohio State. Now he's being asked to react with game speed in the NFL. I think he's too talented not to get it. I think he's going to, but I also think that's the issue right now. And I think it's time, fans who really want to get the answers and are concerned about it, let's deal with the real issues and stop trying to find one person that we can throw darts at or two people and say it's on them. So be interesting to see, everybody, the last 3 weeks. Yeah, we're looking for another Thomas Graham. We want to see Charles Snowden, Jesper Horst, Daz Newsome, whoever it may be. I also want to see 3 more weeks of Justin Fields, because we keep getting the question, why even play him? Sit him down and protect him. No, that's not what he's getting paid millions of dollars for. He's out there. You got 3 more games.
I saw that from a prominent radio host in Chicago suggesting that the other day, and I about threw my computer when I saw that. You didn't draft the kid to put him on the bench. I mean, that's just silly.
It's probably somebody I work with, but I don't know who it was. So I'll get on a limb and say he's an idiot. I don't know who it was, so I'm not calling anybody an idiot, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. So let's jump into the questions here. And since we have a question about Fields and we're talking about it, it's a good place to start, Hub. So I'll throw that up for you.
Twin 129. I hear more concerns about the looping delivery from Justin Fields' throwing motion. Do you guys think that's going to be a problem and can be fixed? I noticed Kyler Murray has the same slight loop. Sean, I haven't heard that at all. I'm not saying somebody hasn't mentioned it, but I probably watch as much tape as anybody, and no, it's not something I've seen or that concerns me. And I actually haven't had a lot of conversation, heard a lot of conversation about that. Maybe I'm missing it.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm with you. You see the arm talent from Justin Fields. He's making some big time throws, and I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. I mean, all these guys, all these quarterbacks have a slightly different angle or arm motion, and the zip on Justin Fields' ball and his ability to get it downfield is really all I think you need to see to I don't know what the word I'm looking for is to get rid of those concerns.
Yeah, Twin, I think that he still needs to develop a lot better touch. I mean, he has shown he can throw some soft passes, he can throw some darts, but he doesn't seem to have everything in between. That's like every young player that comes into the league. But when he wants to go for the hair trigger, he's got it. I don't think the delivery is the problem. I think the issue is the time that he needs to get to that before he pulls that trigger.
The only thing mechanically that I've noticed with him, and it's not consistent, and I don't think it's a long-term issue. His arm slot or anything like that doesn't seem to be an issue. He does occasionally sail a ball, and most of the time when I've noticed it, it's because he's not getting that back hip through and getting them squared down to the field, which is a pretty common issue. I mean, to me, that's just a young quarterback, and that's something that's going to work itself out.
Yeah, when you spend a lot of time talking to coaches about this stuff, you begin to get an appreciation for how critical the coordination of the footwork and the arm talent is. And to Kyle's point there, it's when these guys are really firing on all cylinders, forget the Patrick Mahomes and Brett Favres of the world. They are the two exceptions to the rule. They are the only Hall of Fame quarterbacks I know who've gotten away with never developing good mechanics. I mean, the rest of these guys, when you watch a Peyton Manning, when you watch a Drew Brees, even Ben Roethlisberger, even Russell Wilson, who's a running quarterback, their mechanics are usually flawless. And so that's just something that takes time. And the other piece of this, guys, is that Justin's production is historically low for rookie starting quarterbacks, matched only by Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. The two other rookies drafted ahead of him, all from this class. Mac Jones' numbers are better, but you saw last week that he can be had too, depending on the situation, if he has to be more than a game manager. And so some of this is just NFL teams, even the bad teams, drool when they see a rookie quarterback out there, because they know how to get them off their spot, how to get their timing off and get them out of rhythm. And that's where having your mechanics develop perfectly is what separates you from a rookie and a guy who's now learned how to play the position. Got any more questions?
Yeah, what do we got, Kyle?
Yes, since we're talking rookies, let's head over to Tevin Jenkins. Kwai has a question for us here.
Kwai, and we're just calling you Kwai. We hope that's okay, buddy. As a regular visitor, what are your takes on Jenkins' defense of Fields getting hit late, happening all season, in my opinion, and Ifedi's reaction to the penalty? Ifedi hasn't hit an opposing player that hard all year. Kwai, that's an exaggeration. That's an example of people wanting to go after somebody, and I understand your frustration. Ironically, Quai, I asked Matt Nagy about that yesterday and wanted his take on, who was wrong. Jenkins, Ifedi, was one right? Were they both right? And Matt had, I think, a pretty reasonable explanation. He said, no, in certain regards, they were both right. He said, one of the struggles, Sean, you can maybe comment on this too. The press box is the best place to watch a football game because you have the whole field view and you can see everything that's happening and really get a sense of why things are working and why they're not. But we struggle to get replays up there. Some of it's just where the monitors are and where our seats are. But even with that, you can only do so many things at once. And so you really have to watch a game again afterwards to pick up on everything. And that was an example. I didn't see the full exchange there that caused that penalty. And initially, Jenkins went after whoever the Viking was, didn't really go after him, just went up to him and was kind of jawing at him. And it was the Viking player who swatted him in the helmet first, and then he immediately swatted back, which most players are going to do. And as the officials find ways to screw up everything, how they could not have seen the initial swat, I don't know, because it was a couple seconds after the play. But they flagged Jenkins. It should have been 2 flags or it should have been the Viking. But Jenkins gets flagged, and then he got really upset. And that seems to be the part that everybody sees. Then Ifedi comes over and gets upset with him. I take exception to the idea that Tevin Jenkins is the only player on the Bears who has defended their quarterback. I mean, I have seen a number of those offensive linemen over the course of the season go in to get in the way and protect them a little bit. Jenkins was the first one to get a penalty for it, so maybe that's why you all noticed it. And so I think that the answer on Jenkins, or at least Matt's answer, was that's a kid, protecting his teammate. We want to see that. We're okay with that. But you have to be smart about it because the 15-yard penalty really hurt. Then you turn around, you come to Ifedi. Ifedi did exactly the right thing. He's trying to tell the kid, you cannot do that. And Ifedi was frustrated because it was the 3rd or 4th stupid penalty that they've gotten in that game. And so at the end of the day, I know Nagy's take, Sean, and my take was that they were both probably okay. But that's a classic example of when everything's going wrong, you start to look like, Keystone Cops out there. And that was kind of how that looked.
Yeah, when everything's going wrong, it's going wrong. And isn't it always the second guy throwing a punch or a shove who gets caught? I mean, that's just classic there. I have no problem with Tevin Jenkins doing what he did and step. You like to see that fire. Somebody has to show that fire. They're all obviously behind Justin Fields as their quarterback, but we haven't seen anything quite like that from any of these other guys after Justin took a hit. I understand why Germain Ifedi would be upset with Tevin Jenkins in that situation. You're struggling to score points, and certainly you don't want a penalty. I just don't know if shoving your teammate twice is really the way to go about it. I think it's heated in those moments, but you would hope that they would find a more productive way to do that.
Hub, you bring up a good point when you're talking about when you're up in the press box and when you're on the TV, you can see the entire field. We saw how that was developing. When you're on the field, though, or like when you're standing down there at Soldier Field or any NFL stadium, really any football at any level, you can't see the whole field. And what I think probably happened was the way that developed, it looked like Tevin Jenkins looked over, saw his quarterback laying on the ground, didn't know how it happened, but saw what was kind of unfolding, got in it. And it was the same thing with Germain Ifedi. Germain Ifedi wasn't actually in that scrum. I'm pretty sure he was off to the side. Yeah. And he saw the flag come out and he had the same reaction. He didn't see what was happening. So it's loud. Those guys can't hear each other. They can't see everything. So they're just reacting to what's happening around them is essentially what happens.
Well, and here's the punchline of the whole thing, guys. And by the way, I think a lot of our listeners know that another one of my jobs, I'm a sideline reporter for Westwood One. And so I do get to be down there and see that stuff. And while you don't see everything, sometimes you're the only one who sees what's really going on and knows what was happening. And I will guarantee you that the second shove from Ifedi was because of whatever Jenkins said to him after he shoved him the first time. And at that point, they're teammates. It's not like they got a problem, but they're playing football out there. But the play should have been flagged. That was the most part. I mean, it wasn't a violent hit. It wasn't a dangerous hit, but Fields got shoved a full 1.5 yards out of bounds and knocked down. And the fact that the Bears weren't flagged after some of the stupid flags they did get, and now I don't think Jenkins, that's necessarily what he was thinking. But guys, I've gone back 3 times to try and see what Travis Gibson did for his flag, and I still haven't seen what he did. And some people who've been texting and emailing me and tweeting at me say that it was actually Akeem Hicks. Nobody seems to know. But I know Nagy was more bothered by that one because they pulled Gibson off the field and they kept him off the field for a few minutes. And so, all of this stuff, quiet, it's a good question. And I asked it too. That doesn't mean I'm not saying it was good because I asked it, but I agree with you. I was curious about it.
Yes. It was a great question.
Well, I got to ask the coach about it. And his response, which I agree with, is that it was football. And that he wished neither one had done what they did, but he understood why they both did what they did and that they weren't punishable offenses, I guess, is the way to leave that one if we want to get to our next query.
And I'll throw one more thing about Tevin Jenkins in there too, just overall. You brought it up earlier, Hub, about him being excited. Listen, this is a young kid. He's kind of outgoing to begin with, shows a lot of emotion. I'm sure he feels the pressure of the fact that he had to be on the sideline for all those weeks. Now that he's finally out there, he's doing everything he can to help his team. I think you've seen that obviously in that penalty, but you've seen that with the jumpiness, with the false start, the holds. You can't really chalk it up to that, but I've seen some people criticize him and already worried about him, but just give the kid some time. He's just excited out there and wants to help his team after missing time.
Let me explain something to y'all, and I'll see if Sean agrees, and then we'll get back to the next question. I love Tevin Jenkins, and we haven't really gotten to spend much time with him because when these guys are injured, they do not talk to the media, at least not in this Zoom environment. And under normal times, we could, talk to him on the field or in the locker room. But we met him after the draft. We met him at rookie mini camp and OTAs, and then from training camp on, nobody got to talk to him until last week. My first reaction after he was drafted, meeting him, I immediately thought of George and of Mice and Men. Not dumb, not challenged, none of that. But this gentle giant who acted like a kid in a candy store. I mean, obviously not the most worldly, Sean, I guess is the way I would put it. A single parent family with his dad. He lost his mom fairly young. Kind of a 6'7", 330-pound gee whiz, I'm in Wonderland type guy, and now he's out there being asked to be a fully grown adult and react to all this stuff. And he's gone through all the adversity he's gone through to get out on the football field. And so I think there is a real growing up maturity process for this kid. And again, physically, athletically, you can see you may have something special there. Now, I'm convinced it's right tackle. I think they're making a big mistake with him on the left side, but we'll see about that. There's time to figure that out. But here opens the game with another penalty, lines up on the wrong side of the line of scrimmage, and then this happens. And you can just see this is a guy who's trying to get his feet under him just playing in the NFL, let alone playing well. So be patient. There's nothing to worry about there yet, I guess is my message on that. Sean, I don't know how else to describe him.
Yeah, you could see it on his college tape. There's some nasty there, and you just want that to be channeled in the right way, and you want it to be channeled, on the field, but during the play, not after the play. And Hub, I'm curious to get your thoughts on now that Germain Ifedi is back. What do you think they do with those three tackles with Jenkins and Borum and Germain Ifedi?
Well, you have a clear answer here that may not turn out to be the right answer, because I don't know if Matt Nagy and his staff are ready to accept what the rest of us assume as a foregone conclusion. But to not start Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum, and to not start Jalen Johnson, assuming he gets off the COVID list, and Thomas Graham, and Kindle Vildor in the slot, because Vildor also had a bit of a bounce back game on that. He wasn't exceptional, but he played better than he had been playing to get himself benched. And Graham looks and has the size for a boundary corner. Those five guys have to start these last three games no matter what happens. And Germain Ifedi, great guy, not going to be back. He's a free agent, and you love having the depth that Matt Nagy talks about, but let's be realistic about, and in fairness to Matt, even if he's going to be back, he has to know, so, if they don't start those five guys the last 3 weeks, then that's just one more reason to make changes.
You got to start those guys at offensive tackle, Borum and Jenkins. And Hub, I actually love the idea of getting Vildor back into the slot because, one, yeah, he did struggle a little bit on the boundary. Graham, you want to see what you have there. The other thing is Jalen Johnson, after the Packers game, talked about how he's still learning the slot. I'm not sure that's ever going to come because, the Bears typically haven't wanted to have someone traveling with a receiver like that. So that takes away that need. If Kendall Vildor can play that slot position, a position that the Bears have kind of struggled to fill the last couple of years, that takes away a need in the offseason.
Well, and Vildor had played a little bit of both before he became the starting corner this year. So I'm just talking about looking at your kids now. This was the question that we had earlier. I forget from who, but that's an example of it. That's something that has to happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, I was saving the kind of the off-season question until we got through the on-field stuff. So we're going to go all the way back to the top here. I'm looking for it from Rick, who was asking about Roquan Smith. Here we go.
By Roquan not making the Pro Bowl the last 2 years, does that help the Bears in their contract talks with him? And has there ever been a player without an agent to negotiate their deal? Rick, no, it doesn't help the Bears in their contract. Everybody knows Roquan Smith is one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Everybody knows he should be in the Pro Bowl. Micah Parsons may be the defensive player of the year, but he hasn't even played inside linebacker half the season, and he took one of those Pro Bowl spots, from Roquan. I'm confused because the Bears announced their 2 Pro Bowls. I haven't seen the full teams even announced anywhere. I'm not sure what's going on there.
It came out last night. Wednesday evening.
All right. So who got?
Let me pull it up 1 second.
There should be 3 inside linebackers, and I would guess Roquan would be the first alternate, but that's not the same thing.
Give me a second. I'll pull it up.
Yeah. All right. Well, just to go on with your question, Rick, Roquan's going to break the bank, and I think one of the questions is does he want to sign a long-term deal here? I have no indication that he doesn't. He seems to enjoy being a Chicago Bear. And to the agent question, remember he didn't have an agent going into the draft, but he did have one negotiate that first contract for him. He has not had an agent since, which is wise because there's not much they can do in the 5 years of your rookie deal. But he has not said that he won't have one. He has not said he's going to try and negotiate for himself. He's just said he didn't want to think about it during the season. And my guess is, because Roquan's a pretty bright guy, is that even though he may be a bright guy, this is what agents do. You're not going to bring in somebody who's never played middle linebacker to play middle linebacker. I don't think you want somebody who's never negotiated an $80, $90 million contract to do that. So my guess would be that he will hire an agent, and you just hope that he hires the right guy, because some of these players get screwed by their agents, not intentionally, but agents, do not always have the player's best interest ahead of their own best interest. I'm not saying they don't have their player's best interest at heart. But my guess is that he will hire an agent. So I don't think that's an issue. And I do think, there's this other great myth out there that somehow Ryan Pace has mismanaged the salary cap. That couldn't be less true. They never had cap trouble until last year, and would not have had cap trouble if it was not for COVID. And they currently have the 5th most cap space of any team in the league going in the next year, and they have the ability to create more. So I think they'll get Roquan done if they want, and I think Roquan will do it with an agent.
I think Roquan.
Just an update here. Pro Bowl linebackers for the NFC, Micah Parsons and Bobby Wagner are the 2 inside linebackers. Yeah,
and Bobby Wagner is going to make it every year, and Bobby Wagner doesn't deserve it either. Fred Warner does, and Fred Warner didn't get it because he's missed some games with injury, and you've got Devin White out there who absolutely should be in the Pro Bowl, and so it's a loaded position. We've talked about this, I think, a little bit on and off. I don't think I've written about it, but I know we've talked about it. This is the age of the inside linebacker in the NFL.
Wasn't there an Atlanta inside linebacker that made it too?
There should be 3. Yeah.
I'm only seeing 2 on NFL.com.
I think I can't remember the kid's name, but there was an Atlanta middle linebacker. I'm pretty sure that made it.
Well, it'd be a Deion Jones, wouldn't it? I mean,
no, it wasn't Deion Jones. It was a name that I had to look up, but that's partially because I haven't watched a lot of the Falcons defense this year.
But then you wonder how that guy would make the Pro Bowl, since this is mainly, a lot of fan vote. I don't know. Anyway, The answer to your question, Rick, is no. I think it's an unfortunate slight, but it's not one that should cost him any money. And it may even cause him to negotiate different types of incentives in his deal outside of the Pro Bowl.
I'm going to throw a question up from Gary talking about salary cap. And first off, I know the answer here, Hub, is going to be that Mack and Quinn are going to be back, but I think it's more about how you go about roster construction. So I'll let you read this here.
Well, yeah, Gary Ross is texting, Bears might have the 5th most cap next year, but you have too much money tied up in outside linebacker between the $30 million for Mack and almost $20 million for Quinn. what do they do at that position? They play Mack and Quinn. I'm not sure what the question is. I mean, they're two of the best defensive players in the NFL. That's why they're expensive. This is not unusual. And
that is where you want to pay.
Yeah.
That's where you want your premium talent to be paid at. What is a wide receiver, offensive tackle, and particularly when you're not paying your quarterback, when you have a guy on a rookie deal. Now I threw this up here simply because we do talk about if they want to generate extra cap room, what can they do? I think there's other ways you can do it without kicking the can down the road in terms of restructuring deals. They've already done it with Mack once or twice already. They haven't done it with Quinn. I believe they could save some money if they restructured with Quinn, but I think there's going to be other ways that the Bears can generate more cap space and have to do that, right, Hub?
Well, yeah, first of all, the answer to Gary's question is you're not doing anything with Mack and Quinn because there's still dead money on those deals. And so if you try and move them, you lose cap space. You don't gain it, and at least at this point of those deals, first of all, you wouldn't want to move them. I mean, Robert Quinn is about to break the Bears' all-time sack record. Khalil Mack was on pace to do the same thing. And now you've got Angelo Ruccia wants. Is there any way they could move Mack in his contract? Why would you do that? I mean, you've got a defensive MVP candidate. I don't understand where this stuff comes from. You're not going to at this stage, at his age with that contract, you're not going to get back the 2 first-round picks you gave up for him, and he's worth 2 first-round picks. Again, when he got hurt, he was on pace to have a career year. He's only going to be 31 now. I know being in the 30s is scary to some people with NFL players, but a lot of them are still playing their best football, So, guys, that's not the problem with the Chicago Bears right now. I don't know what else to say.
Well, I think you wrote about it early in the week too, and we've talked about it a little bit over the last couple of weeks. Is it a rebuild or a reboot? And the question from Angelo there is sorry, Angelo, but it clearly from the camp of just burn it to the ground, fire everyone, start over, which isn't the case. It's not going to be what the Bears do. Even if they make a change at general manager, they're not whoever comes in is not coming in to tear this thing down. They feel like as I said, when you have a rookie quarterback that you have high expectations for, you want to be able to compete quickly when you have that guy on that rookie deal. But because of what you have at defense, you're not going to be able to get back what you need to in return for Mack. Mack and Quinn are here. Roquan Smith, we expect to be back. You have talent at Eddie Jackson and Jalen Johnson. You have a solid defense. You've got a pretty well rebuilt young offensive line. You have the quarterback. You have the running back. There are clearly a lot of holes on this team that need to be filled, and there needs to be much better coaching in the future. But expecting, if you go into this offseason expecting them to blow this up and start over and try and rebuild from the ground up around Justin Fields, you're going to be very much disappointed.
Well, and Sean, the problem there is, I think Kyle just did a nice job of explaining, is that the whole advantage you have is Fields on that rookie deal. The key to that is competing next year or no later than his 3rd or 4th year. And if you blow this up, you're not going to be able to do that. Whereas if you reboot, if you make some really astute moves this offseason, you don't have much draft capital, but you will have the draft capital you need. And assuming you don't make any more stupid trades, you'll have the draft capital you need beginning in 23. And there is the ability. Now, at that point, by 23, you've got Quinn and Mack at an age where you have to be concerned, but you also can get out of the contracts at that point. And so if the idea is simply getting something back for them, you're not going to get nearly their value. And that's why these conversations don't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I feel like it's much more likely that they could restructure Robert Quinn's contract in some way. Like you said, Hub, they can get out of it any of these next 3 years. He's not the way it is right now. He has no guaranteed money in 22, 23, 24. You can restructure that to be more favorable in 2022. I don't know if they would want to do the same with Mack because they've done it so many times already that they've pushed that down the line.
Yeah, I mean, when you make a guy the highest paid defensive player in football, he only was for a few weeks before Donald got his deal or whoever it was who came next. But the point is, when you guarantee $90 million and $140 million, total on the contract, you're going to, at some point, you're going to have some pain. That's the way those contracts work. But this is a guy who is showing that he may be able to play through that contract at a very high level. So it's the last place you should be looking right now. There's not a lot. They have to re-sign James Daniels. They have to re-sign Bilal Nichols. They don't have to, but I think they'd be crazy if they didn't sign those 2 kids. And those are the only, and Roquan, those are the only immediate deals. The other issue, excuse me, is one of the reasons that they have the fifth most cap space is they have the fewest players under contract. They've only got 33 or 34 players under contract. But every team in the league ends up with the bottom 15 or 20 of those guys being, near minimum salary or at least younger players, and they don't cost that much. And so now the big question in my mind is this is all based on a projection that's been made is that the cap is going back to $208 million. And I don't think that's guaranteed yet, but assuming it does, that's what we're talking about. So there's no doubt in my mind that they have enough. Kyle mentioned the 5 defensive players that are core players. It's Quinn, it's Mack, it's Roquan, it's Jackson, and Johnson. They're all signed. They're all expensive, but they're going to be because they're core players, and they have shown enough at this stage of their careers that you can build a really good defense around them. Offensively, most of the promising young talent is young and under contract control. The issue is that you need at least 2, maybe 3 more receivers. You need at least 1 more tight end, and you may need another tackle. Other than that, I like where the interior of the offensive line is at if they re-sign James Daniels. I'm tired of hearing people take shots at Sam Mustipher, but if you're worried about it, James Daniels' ceiling is at center. He could be one of the best centers in the league. Plug Alex Garza in at guard, which he can clearly play. Cody Whitehair can clearly play it. So, you always want to get better on the offensive line, but it's not a desperate need. They don't need to do that much this offseason with maybe 1 or 2 big free agents and maybe another hit in the second round, and Justin Fields taking the step you want and need him to take to have a chance to come back and at least compete for the playoffs. Now, I'm not talking about a Super Bowl contender, but you see how little difference there is right now between the 5th seed and the 10th seed in the NFL. So that's all in front of them if they make the right moves.
I'm going to throw this question up here if I can find it, since now we get into off season and needing to make the right moves. We got a Ryan Pace question here. Or I guess a front office question more.
Yeah, and Thomas, thank you for checking in with us. Unfortunately, we maybe one more question after this. We're going to have to wrap it. We're getting kind of long here, and even though we're all Zoom these days, Sean and I are still going to have to get back to talking to the Bears themselves. But Thomas Klein is asking, do the same rules that apply to interviewing head coaching candidates apply to front office candidates? How soon could the Bears realistically hire someone from another team's front office? I believe the same rule applies, but it didn't need to apply because front office is different. I'm pretty sure that you can, with the permission of another team, talk to someone in their front office at any point during the season. I don't think that's restricted to the last 2 weeks. But I do believe that with Ryan still in the job, you are not allowed to talk to other teams' people in season. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it goes. Sean, I don't know if you've done any more homework.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm not totally sure on the rules there, but yeah, you're right in the sense that they'd either have to fire Ryan Pace or promote him and hire a GM. They'd have to make some sort of announcement, I would think.
I think that the bottom line is that candidates are not going to want to interview for a job that one of their peers has. I mean, that puts them in an extremely uncomfortable position. And it's not the best. It's not putting your best foot forward. And so I think that they have to make a decision on Ryan Pace before they do anything else. Now, that decision could be Ryan is staying with the organization, but we're reorganizing our front office, which opens them up to any possibilities they want, or we're letting Ryan go, or Ryan is in charge of the football operations. Those are their 3 choices, and they have to choose one before they can really do anything else.
Well, we're wondering, this after this week really opens up that window where it's the 2-week final week where you can start talking for about head coaching positions. And a lot of people wonder, okay, is this the week now after the Seattle game the Bears pull the trigger and move on from Matt Nagy? But we bring up the point of, we also want to know what's happening with Ryan Pace. Is there really a point to firing your head coach if you haven't made the decision yet on Ryan Pace? Because you don't want Ryan hiring the coach. What's the point of having a 2-week window to hire or to interview coaches if Ryan Pace is not going to be the guy doing it?
Kyle, I'm so glad you asked that question because everybody's going to have their own take again. But this whole conversation to me is so overrated. It's ridiculous. There are only 2 teams right now that are allowed to start interviewing on Monday. That would be the the Oakland, Los Angeles, Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, I do that all the time. Don't worry.
That would be the Las Vegas Raiders and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay. Look around the league. Who else is in the kind of jeopardy that Matt is? Everything I'm hearing is that Joe Judge is probably going to get one more year in New York. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe the Giants jump in. Other than that, I can't find a hot seat. I mean, Mike Zimmer may end up on the hot seat, but he's in possession of the 7th playoff seed right now. He's not going anywhere.
Mike Zimmer should be on the hot seat.
Well, yeah, but I mean, guys, at the end of the day, do you really think that any of the top coaching candidates are going to jump at the Raiders job or the Jaguars job before waiting 2 more weeks to see what else is out there? Yeah, you can interview, you can go do a sales pitch, but it's not like you're that far behind the 8 ball. It's a unique year in that there aren't going to be that many jobs available. And I don't see that the Bears gain much, if anything, by needing to make the decision between now and Monday as opposed to waiting 2 more weeks. It just doesn't matter that much. And when we talk about the advantage of playing and analyze some young talent for the last 3 weeks, there is an advantage to keeping this all intact for a few more weeks. Again, this is not a defense of Matt Nagy. It's not saying don't fire him. It's just being realistic about what these rules really mean. It's not that big a deal to be able to get to talk to guys in the next, it's not even 2 full weeks. It turns out to be about 11 days, So I know that it's one more thing that you can throw stones at the organization and claim that they're screwing up. But I just think this is totally overrated. I don't know if you guys agree or not.
I mean, I think there's some merit to it, but you bring up some good points. I mean, 2 weeks isn't going to make all that much of a difference. And I thought you bring up an interesting point. Which of those 3 is the most desirable head coaching job right now? The Bears, the Raiders, or Jacksonville?
Well, you certainly get either Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields.
Yeah.
There's enough questions about Derek Carr that there are some who think Carr needs to be moved. I don't understand why. I think the guy plays really well for the most part when you consider what he's dealing with. But then you look at the rest of that mess in Jacksonville. People talk in Chicago about this organization being dysfunctional. This is the Patriots compared to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, that is the worst mess anybody's ever seen, right now. And then the Raiders, I wouldn't go to work for Mark Davis, and I know the man. Well, that's why I wouldn't go to work for him, I guess, but I mean, and so all these things are consideration, guys. There's a bonus here that people aren't talking about. There aren't going to be that many jobs this year. There isn't anywhere else you look where you say, I want that one. There's going to be a surprise. Some coach we're not expecting to get fired is going to get fired. He's going to have a playoff ready team. That'll be out there. But I don't think the Bears are competing for that much for a head coach. And here's another thing, Kyle. We don't have the must-have candidates this year that you've had in recent seasons. I mean, I hear people talking about Brian Daboll like he's God's gift. Look at what's happened to the Bills the second half of the season. I mean, he's not doing anything exceptional there. Yeah, they've done a nice job developing Josh Allen. I mean, one talk radio host was drooling over Joe Brady. He got fired as an offensive coordinator. Other top assistants around. I mean, the guy that I really want is Todd Bowles. I think Todd Bowles will be in demand. Some people are talking Dan Quinn. He could be in demand. But these are veterans. He's done okay. Maybe. I'd certainly interview him. I mean, Eric Bieniemy, I've been waiting forever. Are you going to go hire another Chiefs offensive coordinator after what just happened with Matt Nagy? So I mean, these guys are good candidates, but I don't think the competition is out there this year that you have to worry so much. Again, if the Bears make a decision, if they let Matt go, early next week, I'm not going to say they were wrong because it's obviously something they were going to do anyway. I just don't think it's that important, I guess, is all I'm saying.
I don't know if it's that important. And more importantly, as I said, the joy that overcomes people when that news comes down, which we know there's going to be Bears fans that are very, very excited for that coaching change, but it's going to be pretty short-lived if it also doesn't accompany a change in the front office, which if it happens in season, I don't, if Matt Nagy is let go in season, I don't expect Ryan Pace to also be let go, which means Ryan Pace is probably coming back. So if you're a Bears fan, you probably want that package deal at the end of the year.
Yeah, guys, we're going to have to wrap it here, but I guess where I would leave it is that there is one thing. Often I try and analyze and be objective, and you're a homer and you're defending the Bears. It's really not the case, but this is one case where I'll say it. Yeah, I'm going to defend the Bears on this one. I think it's more important that they take the time they need to make sure that they are making the right decisions and that they have a clear plan of attack and the best plan to go ahead and get this fixed than it is to pull the trigger in the next 2 weeks. And so there's a lot of things you can go after them for, and it's completely justified, but let's not overrate this whole thing about, oh, you got to get it done now. I'm far more concerned that they figure out a way to finally get it fixed and do it right than I am about how quickly they get into the job market.
Yeah, do it right. That's got to be the most important thing right now.
Well, guys, we are overtime, and I think we're going to have to run here, but we certainly appreciate everybody joining us every week, all of you who sent your questions. Sorry we didn't get to more. We always, I think I like the sound of my own voice too much. I got to find a way to get more questions in and back off a bit. But for now, guys, it is an interesting time. I won't say it's a good time, but an interesting time around the Chicago Bears. Seattle is another team. Pete Carroll's certainly not in any jeopardy, but Seattle's another team that is a huge disappointment this year. The two of them will square off on Sunday, and we'll see which club is more prepared and more anxious to play. I think it's going to be Seattle. They don't have to travel Christmas weekend, 2,000 miles, but we'll see. We usually end with predictions. I'll make my prediction. Bears are going to get beat. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I think the Bears are going to get beat. I have a hard time picking them after what we just witnessed.
Kyle?
That's a really good point. I really, really dislike this Seattle team. I don't think it's any good. But the Bears just are not playing well enough on offense to expect them to really beat anyone at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, guys, other than to say they're going to fly away on Christmas Day. You know, you're going to be out in Seattle. We're traveling during this whole surge in COVID. They've had their outbreak. It's just an awful situation. So hopefully it'll be an entertaining game and they'll play well. But it'd be hard to find a way to say, hey, they're going to go out and beat the Seattle Seahawks. But hopefully we'll all enjoy it. More importantly, before we get to it, we hope everybody has just an outstanding Christmas. We know it's a tough holiday season for everybody. Please stay safe, get vaccinated, get boosted, wear your masks, do everything you can to protect you and yours, and find a way with all of that to have an absolutely outstanding Christmas. We hope that you will download your subscription to our podcast. You can go to the app on your phone or go to your iTunes store. You can go to shawlocal.com. And don't forget, if you're hearing it but didn't join us and get to participate, we go live. Now, we did go Thursday this week, but we warned you, normally every Friday morning, 9:30 Chicago time, if you go to YouTube or any of our Twitter accounts, Kyle Nabors, at Sean_Hammond, at Hub_Arkush, you can join this podcast live and participate and get your thoughts out there. Right now, just have a great Christmas, everybody, and we'll talk to you again next week.